Welcome back. We're on Module 1, Part 3, where we discuss the point slope and slope intercept forms of a line. And this is Team Glaze. Now, after this lesson, we want you to be able to graph a line in point slope, but we also want you to be able to make connections between the point slope form of a line and the slope intercept form of a line. So let's begin with the point slope form of a line. And you're going to notice that we have this equation here. It's y minus y sub 1 is equal to m multiplied by x minus x sub 1. Now what this tells us is, number one, it tells us the slope. That's the same slope we're using on the slope-intercept form of a graph. But what changed is this form. We have in parentheses x minus x sub 1. And over here on the left, we have y minus y sub 1. Now, what those represent are the point on your graph x1, comma, y1. Now, as an example, I've got y minus 6 equals 1/3 times x minus 3. And so if you look at this point over here, notice that this is the point 3, comma, 6. So as we write this equation, it ends up turning out to be y minus 6. So that's a positive 6, but we're subtracting it. So that's the y minus y sub 1. And then the slope of 1/3 is multiplied by x minus x sub 1, which is this 3 right here. So that's the form of the equation. Now we use this if we don't know the y-intercept and we've been asked to graph something, or if the y-intercept just isn't an easy thing to locate. You know, when I say a benchmark fraction, we're talking about fractions like 1/2 or fractions like 1/4, things that might be easier to recognize on a coordinate grid than, say, a 0.34 or something. So we're going to use the point slope form of the line in those cases. Now here's another example. We have y plus 1 equals 1/3 times the quantity x minus 2. And let's just make sure you understand how this works. So the slope is 1/3. We can check that. Here's a point, and I'm going to go up 1 and over 1, 2, 3. And then this is the point 2, comma, -1. And so let's check our equation. This would be a y minus a -1 is equal to 1/3 times x minus 2. And everything matches up. A little bit different to see a y minus a -1, so I'm going to write that as a y plus 1, and then you'll see that our equation does match up. Let's do another one. So now I'm giving you the graph of a line, and we're going to do two things. We're going to write this in point slope form of a line, and then we're going to put that into slope intercept form of a line. So let's start with finding the slope. So here's a point where we cross at an integer value. This is a point -3, 2. And then you'll notice over here, we also cross at an integer value. And this is the point 2, 3. So let's find that slope. I guess we'll just count. It's easy enough to count here. So in this case, we're going up exactly one value. So that's our change in y. And our change in x would be everything across here. So we're going from a -3 to a positive 2. That's a 5. So I know our slope is equal to 1/5. Now, let's go ahead and use our equation and find the point slope for the line. So we've got y minus, and I have this point here, and I know the y value. So y minus 2 is equal to the slope of 1/5 times x minus a -3. And as we just discussed, seeing minus and negative isn't always the easiest way to think about numbers. So I'm just going to say y minus 2 is equal to 1/5 times x plus 3. So there it is. That's the point slope of a line. Good enough, right? But then let's take a look at this in slope-intercept form, and then we'll talk about why sometimes we just really like this point slope form of a line. So I'm going to solve this for y. And the first thing I'll do is I'll distribute the 1/5 to both of these terms in the binomial. So that's going to be a y minus 2 is equal to 1/5 multiplied by x plus 1/5 times 3, or in other words, 3/5. And now I'll add 2 to each side. So nothing that we did here mathematically was terribly difficult. In matter of fact, this equation is also really easy to understand. We see that we have the slope of 1/5, and we see we have a y-intercept of 2 3/5. Here's the catch. If I said graph this line, and I didn't give it to you in point slope form, you'd find yourself estimating. You'd have to go up here and say 2 3/5 is somewhere around here, and it's really hard to be accurate, which is why, as I stated earlier in the video, we like to use this when we don't know the y-intercept really clearly. We have just spent some time talking about the point slope form of a line and the slope-intercept form of a line, and we discussed some of the connections between the two, meaning the slope is the same. And we also discussed when you would use one over the other. Thank you very much.